Story 1. Top fuel dragsters while standing right along the fence. Very, very loud. Loudest? No. Jet cars. Loud? Yes. Loudest? No. Shooting my .357 Magnum without ear protection. Quite loud. Not the loudest. Space shuttle launch from the old base viewing area. Pretty dang close. Yes, very loud too. Heavy metal concert. Definitely, but alas, no. A few years ago, myself and a couple of friends took our daughters to a One Direction concert. One Direction Dad's crew was in the house. We even made ourselves t-shirts. It was very cool. I cannot describe the volume level of 50,000 screaming teenage girls. Holy crap, that was the loudest thing ever. Took days for my hearing to recover. Story 2. A .50 caliber gun being fired under a galvanized metal awning. I was at the gun range and didn't notice that another person at the other end of the range was getting ready to shoot. I hadn't yet put in my earplugs. The person fired their weapon and it sounded like a cannon going off. It scared the hell out of me and had my ears ringing for a while afterward. Story 3. Electrical transformer exploding. Whoomp 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 womp 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 boom. Actual electrical transformer exploding, not a dubstep song. Story 4. The loudest thing I have ever heard? Easy. It is that heart-stopping thunderblast of my car stereo at full volume when I get back in after running an errand, completely forgetting I had left it cranked up like a concert sound system. You sit down, turn the key, and boom, you're instantly a hostage to your own questionable volume choices, getting hit with a wall of sound like you are front row at a Metallica show with a side of mild heart attack. Nothing quite says, "Welcome back," like the feeling of your soul momentarily leaving your body as you scramble to turn it down, wondering why you did this to yourself. Story 5. Slayer played Rain in Blood in concert around 2005 or 2006. They followed Killswitch Engage to end the show and were somehow much louder than them by a large margin. Besides music, top fuel dragsters running down a track at speed create a sound that is less like sound and more like a concussive attack. I had in-ear plugs and Howard Late over-ear headphones on. It still upset my tinnitus, and I could feel pressure inside my chest. Story 6. National Hot Rod Association Top Fuel Dragsters. Formula One about 20 years ago, Portland International Raceway, where the race was, had a stretch where the cars were on one side of the barricade, and we were literally feet away on the other. At 200+ miles per hour. Insanely loud. Scared me so bad I hit the floor. This was probably the loudest single noise I've ever heard. Story 7. The guy I was training to be a roll tender on a 72-inch web printing press dropped a full roll of paper from about 15 feet up when he was running the clamp lift truck. It rattled the windows in neighboring buildings and tripped earthquake sensors for most of the equipment in the shop. He got written up but kept his job. Good dude. It rattled him worse than anyone else. Story 8. B-52H bomber. Dad and I just walking out of Lowe's in early 1990s, about 200 feet above us. Even with our fingers in our ears, just phenomenal noise. And this was after the new engine upgrade. Story 9. Man-o-war in a club setting with an arena-sized rig. I thought the plaster was going to come down from the ceiling. I have seen dozens of rock and metal shows, and no one was even a close second. Story 10. I've got two events that tie each other. An Iraqi rocket barrage of a few improvised rocket-assisted munitions that landed about 60 feet away from the bunker I was taking cover in. The original source of my tinnitus. Second, a massive improvised explosive device that we hit on a convoy that nearly tipped our mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle over. Somehow we all made it out with minor wounds and traumatic brain injuries. This definitely exacerbated my tinnitus. Now I hear a constant background ringing that will sometimes randomly get super loud. Story 11. I left my window open one night. I'm not sure if someone set off a firework next to the house or if a transformer blew. I just remember a loud bang waking me up and a flash of light. As I lay back down to go to sleep, I heard things slowly falling from the sky, landing right outside my window. I chose to go back to sleep because that's just what you do when you're a sleep-deprived single mom. I figured if a fire went off, someone would alert us. Story 12. A British Vulcan bomber doing a full power run. I know you built it on purpose to be that loud. I spent my whole career working on jets in the United States Air Force, and nothing destroyed my hearing more than that aircraft. Story 13. Ocean City, Maryland, this past summer. Two military jets were doing practice runs for their annual air show. I'm 46, and it made me so uncomfortable. Loudest thing ever. Story 14. Technically, it was the space shuttle at liftoff, but I was several miles away. However, if you have ever seen, heard, or felt a Harrier jet at hover, you know just how amazingly, unbelievably loud they can be. Story 15. When I was about 5, I went to London Zoo for my birthday. As soon as we got to the lions, there was one literally on the other side of the glass from where we were standing. It looked at me and roared, and I will never forget how loud it was. It was absolutely deafening. Story 16. A truck tire exploded right next to me, literally 2 meters away. I was walking down the street with a couple of my friends, and one of them got knocked to the ground, closest to the road. We all had problems with our left eardrums for a couple of days. Story 17. Could be either an M109 firing, an M1 Abrams, a Top Fuel funny car, 6 pounds of TNT, 8 pounds of C4, an M2 machine gun, or an F-15 in full afterburner. That's why I can't hear anything now. Story 18. Been seeing a common trend of people saying high-caliber guns, concerts, and jets of various types. So I'll throw my lot in. 3 missiles all launched in succession of each other in the span of about 30 seconds, from less than 60 feet away. I couldn't hear properly for the remainder of the week after that. Story 19. I was driving coming off the Grapevine here in California. It's a pretty notorious mountain pass that has a decent grade on both sides. So I was driving in the left lane. My driver's side window was down, and my passenger side window was up. About 100 feet ahead of me in the far right lane, a truck coming off the mountain overheated its brakes, which heated up the wheel and the tire suddenly burst. Holy sweet goddamn. It sounded like someone dropped a manhole cover right next to my head. Both of my ears instantly popped, and I had a ringing in my ears for hours. It was probably 20 years ago, but I will never forget that moment. Story 20. A phalanx firing a 1,000-round burst of depleted uranium anti-aircraft rounds. I was one deck below it on my ship and didn't hear the warning to vacate the area. Story 21. My buddy fired a .45 handgun a few times right next to my left ear when I was younger, and it was completely unexpected, so I didn't cover my ears or do anything to prepare for it at all. It didn't help that the muzzle was in line with my head and ears, pointed the same way I was facing, and within a foot away when it went off. I swear my ears didn't stop ringing for days. I did labor work later in life, including a lot of jackhammering with air-compressed 90-pound jacks. But even that wasn't nearly as bad. Even in the long run, I still feel like that one incident did more damage. Story 22. A .223 round going off right by my ear at an indoor range. I had forgotten to put my ear protection back on. My ears were ringing for hours afterward. I'm just glad I didn't get any permanent hearing damage. Story 23. A trip on the Coast Guard split-hull dredge, the United States ship Currituck. Back in the early 1990s, when I was a freelance photographer for the York County Coast Star in York, Maine, was an unforgettable experience. Watching the dredge pull up sand from the Portsmouth Harbor seabed and pump it into the dredge chamber, then go out to sea with the ocean practically flowing over the bow as the waterline was literally inches from the top of the hull, motor out to Rye Beach and watch the hull literally split in half longitudinally as the sand was deposited off the beachhead, and the ship raised back up in the water. Even on the bridge, the dredging pumps were deafening. That or a disaster area concert. Story 24. Either being behind a jet engine or a gunshot next to my ear, both were absolutely painful. At 130 decibels, the hearing damage may commence, leaving you with tinnitus in many cases. That ringing is also insanely loud. Story 25. Lightning struck very close by outside. It made everyone in the vicinity instantly cover their ears and cower. No thinking necessary. It set off all the fire alarms, and the whole place smelled like burning pine trees. So scary. Story 26. Way back in the past, I was in the Navy. My ship had gone to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for training. One of the things we did was underway replenishment. This is when two ships sail close together on a parallel course at the same speed, pass lines and hoses across, and transfer fuel and other goods from one to the other. We were doing replenishment training with an aircraft carrier. But, being off the coast of Cuba, there was a Russian trawler, typically used by Russian naval personnel to gather intelligence about our ships, that was interfering with us. Every time our ship pulled alongside the carrier and got all the lines and hoses across, the Russian trawler would come up between us, which, being an extremely dangerous situation, would cause us to do an emergency breakaway, disconnect all the lines and hoses, and veer away. This happened several times during the morning. At lunchtime, we took a break. The carrier launched 4 F-14 Tomcats. After lunch, we started up again, and yet again the Russian trawler came up between us, and yet again we had to do an emergency breakaway. But this time, just as we started to veer away from the trawler, the 4 F-14 Tomcats came screaming out of the clouds and did a low pass below the deck level of the carrier, right over the top of the trawler, all four at full afterburner and breaking the sound barrier in the process. Well, if you've ever heard any fighter plane up close and personal, you know that they are loud. And the F-14 Tomcat is a big plane with two big engines, and when they went screaming over the top of this trawler, it was like the gates of hell had opened up and released every shrieking banshee and demon ever. It was not only the loudest thing I'd ever heard, but it was also the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. The guys on the carrier knew this was coming. The guys on our ship did not. We didn't get to put on hearing protection or prepare for this in any way. The noise alone was beyond terrifying. People dove for cover. Some even soiled themselves. It was like the world was coming apart. The guys on the carrier got a big kick out of it and had a huge laugh. Guys on our ship, not so much. But that was it. For F-14 Tomcats screaming past on full afterburner at an altitude of about 40 feet, less than 100 feet away. Story 27. Trains being hitched. I've heard an ammunition dump explode, but those metal cars smack so hard I can feel it in my chest. Second place goes to a dull reciprocating saw cutting through corrugated sheet metal. That'll rattle the old noodle. Story 28. I lived about 3 doors down from the aviation department of my college campus. I didn't realize one of the courses was rebuilding a jet engine on the bench until they fired that off the last day of the semester. Story 29. It definitely felt like it, and I can't think of anything else. In 2017, my mother's car caught fire in the middle of the night. The only reason we knew this happened without the house burning down was because we lived in a trailer home. My room was alongside the driveway, the bed along the wall of the driveway, and the car parked directly next to the house. How this relates to how we knew is because I woke up to the tire exploding. I was confused. I thought maybe someone somehow crashed into the tree in our front yard, but couldn't see through the window plastic. However, there obviously should have been signs of headlights. It happened again, so I woke up my boyfriend, who somehow slept through both tire explosions, and asked him to go see what's going on. He comes back inside and says the car is on fire. Thankfully, the fire department got there in time so that the fire didn't spread to the house. Arson detectives determined it was some type of wiring failure, which may have been caused by a rodent chewing on the wires. But specifically, no one set the car on fire, which was all I cared about. Not really the way you want to wake up at 3 a.m. after a 16-hour shift. But hey, my life is nothing if not interesting, I guess. Story 30. 90mm heat round, M48A3 with a T-type blast deflector, which blew the shock wave back into the tank commander's face. The tank commander was not allowed to wear ear protection because he had to be on the radio. A decibel is a logarithmic measurement, not linear, and the level at the cupola ranged between 146 and 152 decibels. Service connected for hearing loss. Story 31. Firing a 12-gauge shotgun. Sonic boom from a North American F-100 Super Sabre. Blue Oyster Cult concert from the front row. Lightning strike from about 10 yards away. Story 32. Fighter jets breaking the sound barrier below deck in the canyon behind our house in Central Oregon. A tractor pull vehicle with 9 big block V8 engines, each with dual superchargers and open headers, running wide open throttle about 8 feet away from my unprotected ears. My grandfather using a circular saw with the blade on backwards to cut corrugated galvanized roof panels while I held the panels. a fireworks exhibition where they simultaneously detonated 100 of those loud bangers used to signal the start of a fireworks show. Story 33, Heartbreaker, excellent heart tribute band, at the Ritz in Raleigh, North Carolina. The sound guy messed up so badly that several people got up and left. My wife had to go to her doctor because her eardrums burst. It took them 2 songs to get their act together and get the volume down to a somewhat tolerable level. Story 34, either the Air Force Thunderbirds in their F-16 fighter jets, or an explosion caused by someone accidentally detonating his welding tank. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. Heard it blow from a few miles away. Rest in peace, dude. Story 35. We have jet fighters fly overhead for Broncos home games. Sometimes they fly low and fast, loud as ever. Other times, we have random flyovers at my work. It's near uninhabited open space, so people do test flights there. They bring the boom with them, shakes, rattles, and rolls everything. It's cool, and then we all run outside to see if we can identify what flew over. Story 36. A band called Southern Culture on the Skids. It was at a club called Fletcher's in Baltimore. The sound guy turned it up to 11 and the venue had a very low ceiling. When we left, all I could hear was a constant buzzing sound. It took a couple of days to recover my hearing,